personal perspective, okay, we are live. From a personal perspective, I'm super excited to like compare notes with some of the stuff that we've been doing with Redwood and RSC and personal software. So been looking forward to this episode.
Absolutely. There's lots to talk about.
There is. Let me tweet about this because we can usually get a little bit more of an audience if I tweet about it. Go figure. And there we are.
Whenever I go live, it's like I have to go check and make sure that the stream is, even though if it says the stream is working correctly, I'm like, can I just see it live? I just need to see it with my own eyes.
But I can't have it going at I mean, I've gotten better if I can kind of keep it not in the peripheral.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to see myself because it's delayed. So it's like 5 minutes later, I see not 5 minutes, but 5 seconds later.
There's that like quirk. And then also I feel like there's been at least 2 or 3 times where somehow, I don't know how, I muted myself and I'm rambling for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then somebody in the chat was like, hey, by the way, we haven't been able to hear you for 3 minutes. Like, oh, okay, great.
I'm like running risky right now because I used to always hardwire my headphones into the microphone so I can hear the feedback. But now I got these AirPods Max and I'm just going wireless now. And so you can't, monitor yourself because of the delay. And I'm just praying that everything works. I usually have like an audio monitor up somewhere and hope that that's accurate, but still it's like rolling the dice.
So we recorded an episode live at PostCon. And I mean, you'd think, live. We were in kind of like a green room area, so it's not like we had an audience. But they Postman went out and got microphones for us, so we didn't have to travel with any of our equipment. And they got this fancy microphone that we weren't used to. It has a feature that when you touch the microphone, it mutes it. Which, if you're at home, I'm sure that's great. There is a red light on it to let you know you're muted. But when the guest sat down and grabbed it, the red light was pointed down. So we couldn't even see the red light. And so I don't think it occurred to me until I got ready to edit it in post. And
oh no,
I can't hear Ruben.
No.
But because this is crazy, because we were there in person, you could pick up enough of his audio off of my microphone. There's enough audio bleed between my microphone and James's microphone to hear him, but it sounded awful. Like I wouldn't have wanted to listen to the episode, but I sent it over to, there's a service called like La 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 AI or something. And they were able to use AI to get rid of the microphone bleed, like the echo, and bump the levels so that it's listenable. You can still hear like a little bit of grit in his voice, like particularly on the beginnings and the endings, but it like saved the episode.
Yeah, that's clutch.
It's crazy. Okay, I will go ahead and officially start the episode. Let me pull up our intro music and we'll get going. Perfect. Okay. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we have Lee Robinson joining us from Vercel. Super excited to have him on and talking about personal software and the future of Next.js.
Nice. Thank you, Amy.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compressed.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood.js core team.
And hey, y'all, my name is Brad Garapi. I'm a senior front-end developer at Stripe.
And as I mentioned, we have my good friend Lee on joining us from Vercel.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Now, I did want to highlight this before we get into the episode and just publicly thank you, Lee, because you have been a longtime supporter of the podcast. Vercel is actually a founding sponsor, and you have just supported us from the beginning. So wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, of course. We're happy to support.
Awesome. Well, there's so much good stuff to talk about. I tell you what, let's start by talking about kind of your role at Vercel and how you landed. Your official title is head of DevRel, right?
Yeah, so I have been at Vercel for almost 5 years now. Time flies. Funny story. I actually started part-time, like helping write blog posts before I ended up joining full-time a few months later. So yeah, about 5 years ago, I started working part-time. I joined in kind of a ambiguous role. We had 30 people, so it was kind of small. I was doing a little bit of sales, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of engineering, and then eventually ended up starting our DevRel team. And over time have also worked on our documentation team, helped out more on the product side. And today I have 3 teams that I work on: 1, documentation; 2, our developer community; and 3, education, all up. And that's what I like to call developer experience, which is just an umbrella term for it all.
Was it kind of like right place, right time thing where when you started part-time writing the blog post and like kind of advanced up, things just fell into place naturally? Or was it something you were really driving towards, like you were pushing to progress your career and, reach this head of DevRel position?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot because I never expected to do this. If you would have asked me when I was starting my career, I didn't even know what DevRel was. I didn't expect to get involved in more of the education side of it, but I have always enjoyed, like when I backtrace, I can see the writing on the wall, like I can see the breadcrumbs. I always enjoyed education. I always enjoyed learning and teaching others. I've always enjoyed creating videos and writing and all that stuff, but I had never really materialized that into, oh, actually you can do that for your job. So for the first 7 years of my career, I was just a product engineer. I was just building things. I was a senior software engineer. I thought, oh, one day I might be a staff engineer or something of that. Like I had only really thought in the kind of individual contributor engineer mindset. And I knew I really liked the front end, but I hadn't really thought much further than that. And it was a little bit of right place, right time because I had helped my previous company migrate from React and Webpack, just like a standard setup, to Next.js in like 2018. So from 2018 to 2020, I was helping with this. And at the time, Next.js was basically extremely unknown. Not that many people were using it up until I'd say 2020 is when it really took off. So I was creating content and videos and courses to try to help people learn how to use the framework. And eventually in 2020, the team was like, hey, do you want to just do this full time? I was like, well, actually, I'm not sure, but let's give it a shot. And yeah, it's been good so far.
Oh, that's funny that you're like, maybe.
This is the first startup I've ever worked at. So there's been a lot of first time officially doing anything like DevRel, first time working at a small company that moves very fast and was very different than the previous engineering cultures that I had worked in. So I've learned a lot, definitely.
So when you're talking about learning a lot, what's maybe been the most surprising thing for you in terms of Next.js and the React ecosystem?
Yeah, it's hard to look and think about the future too much, but if you would have told me that the Next.js community would look like it does today in 2020, I would have been blown away. Like at the time, it's like hard to even think back there, but like Next.js didn't really even have the ability to do static sites. It was just coming out in the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020 was the first time there was support for being able to statically render pages. Going way back, Next.js started as a server rendered framework. And at the time, like the most popular way of doing this was Gatsby in the React world, using Gatsby for doing a statically generated React site. And it was a top request we'd had in the Next.js community for a while. So we added that, the ability to kind of opt in on a page level. and the ability to, if you weren't doing any data fetching on a page, let's just automatically make the page static, which we call automatic static optimization. And it was such a small thing, but over time has actually turned out to be a really important part of being able to choose what you want to do on a per route basis. Maybe I want this to render dynamically. Maybe I want to pre-render some of this page. So yeah, it continues to shock me, the size of the community and how many people are excited and interested in building with not only Next, but just the broader React ecosystem is just mind blowing. React just keeps innovating and changing and growing over the past 10 years.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool too, just to see how far not only React's reaches, but also Next and how much of the internet it powers.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is stumbling on fast websites and I go and see how it's built and it's Next.js. Like it makes my day every single time. I'm trying to buy something and I'm like, oh, this website's awesome. I love the scroll. And I go check, built with Next.js. And it makes me feel some bit of validation in the work that I do, because I'm maybe on some engineering team somewhere, the person who implemented Next.js watched one of my videos or read the documentation or, was involved in some way. So that helps keep the drive going.
I was going to wait and see if Brad had a question.
So go for it. Go for it.
I was like, I have so many. So when you're thinking about teaching, I mean, that's one of the things that I love about DevRel and teaching is that's really the best marketing. If people don't know how to use it, then they won't. So I think that's also a testament to your team to say Next has been successful because of the work that you've done, because of the education content. What are some of the things that you think about when you're trying to teach complex topics? I think specifically about RSC right now, Next.js has been the most successful implementation of that. And so a lot of it is also like bringing developers along with you to say, this is how you use React. This is how you use React server components because we're doing it within Next. So how do you think about those mental models? How do you think about these are topics I need to teach? What does that process look like?
Yeah, maybe counterintuitively, I can give you an example of where I think we maybe haven't done a good job here, and then we can work backwards towards what good looks like. I think one of the hardest parts about education and advocacy is when something new comes out and you're power user number one, it's very easy to get very excited about that new feature. Like when I first started building with server components and like the very early versions of the app router in 2021. The first experience was pretty bad. The first experience, it was still like half built. So we were still building it and getting the things figured out. But once we got something that actually worked, it took me maybe, 2 or 3 months to kind of open up my brain to understand this different way of building. I had so much experience building with the Pages router version of Next.js and just like all of the previous patterns that once I gave it a few months and I really thought about it and explored this new pattern, I was like, oh wait, this is actually really, really exciting. I've had a lot of these patterns and problems in the past that I wish I could solve in this way. And this RSC solution actually makes things much easier. So it was very easy. And I look back where I was very excited about it. And the catch is, and it's something I've hopefully learned to get better at doing, is sometimes from a community member end user perspective, it's hard to tell the difference between excitement and endorsement. So I was excited about it, and it was helping me build applications that I was having enjoyment with. I had previously faced a lot of the pains. So I knew how well it solved those problems, but not everybody is in that same spot. So in retrospect now going forward, one thing I've noticed is that some people are interested in server components, but they maybe haven't built in the previous way where they really have felt and understood the problems that server components solve. And when you don't have that, you're a little bit more skeptical of, wait, why are we doing this? Like, why do I have this weird directive thing? Is that really necessary? If you've built that way and you've had that pain in the past, then it's like, oh yeah, sure. Okay. That makes sense. But if you're coming into it new, it almost takes a different approach for education to get people to really open up their brain to it.
Mm-hmm.
So counterintuitively, I have actually been starting to tell more people like, maybe you don't need server components. Here are some of the things that I think it's really great at. And I think it solves these problems pretty well in an elegant way. You can write your full stack component in JavaScript. It's not like you have two separate programming models. It's just React on the client and server, and so on and so forth. If that's not something that you're excited about, like, and you have experience with Laravel or something, you can just write Laravel. Like, you don't have to use it. I think sometimes the endorsement or the excitement comes off like an endorsement. So trying to add a little bit more nuance in it, but I am happy to gush on the things that I'm excited about with it, because I do think that server components solve so many problems in product development for building great apps, not just front end, not just back end, but kind of the whole spectrum, that challenges a lot of the ways that engineering teams build apps today, which is why it's also like doubly a hard thing for people to kind of embrace, because it changes the working relationship between a front-end team and a back-end team, because those worlds are kind of merged together a bit. It's not like, hey, I've got this back-end team, they write all the APIs, they just give me an API endpoint and we're done here, and then I go build the UI. It's like actually saying, no, that causes a lot of friction sometimes. Not that it's necessarily bad, but there might be a better way if you step back and imagine a world where maybe you didn't have that, throw it over the fence type mentality. So long-winded answer.
No, that's a good answer. And I think, it makes me wonder, how much of that pain do you feel like people have to feel in order to get on board with the new stuff? Like, because you don't want to give an entire history lesson, but you also want them to understand this really is the best way. Yeah,
I think that true understanding and appreciation for a technology only comes through it only comes through having felt some of the pain of what the technology solves. Like, you can't just stumble into these new technologies and it might feel great on day one. You might say, wow, this seems really interesting. But once you start getting into more of the complicated bits, it might just feel like, wow, this is way too complex. I don't understand any of this stuff. Why did we add all this complexity in the first place? But as you start to go back up the stack and up the layers of complexity, it's like, oh, okay, that's why we have compilers. Okay, that's why we bundle code. Okay, so it kind of depends on the type of learner you are, because for some people, they prefer to get their hands dirty as soon as possible, build something, see the validation that they hit save and the pixels on the screen light up. They're not trying to read a manual about compilers and bundlers before they get their button on the screen that says hello world, right? But somewhere along that journey, they need to have an appreciation of the foundations. Right. Otherwise, the first weird stack trace they get that has something to do with a compiler, then they're like, why do I need a compiler anyway? Can't we just get rid of that? Is that even helpful? So it's a tricky one, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of want to go back to the really interesting point you made about the collaboration between front-end developers and back-end developers that React Server components kind of change.
Yeah.
Do you think as React Server components become more widely supported and widely used, do you think we will see more full stack web developer positions for new projects rather than a front-end team and a back-end team?
Yeah, definitely. I have a long post on my website about this called Product Engineers, learob.com. Basically, what I've started to notice over the years of being involved in, kind of before I joined Vercel, but being involved in front-end engineering teams and working with back-end engineering teams, was it just felt like increasingly the distinction between front-end and back-end was less helpful, because to actually deliver a product feature, you would need to work across the client and the server. You couldn't really just operate in a vacuum and assume that you were going to get the perfect API endpoint that solved all of your needs. The reality was much messier than that. And as we kind of hit 2020, 2021, as AI started to become more popular, ChatGPT came out, all of a sudden this just got amplified very significantly, I think, where if you have AI tools that can generate code, even if it's not perfect, even if you have to iterate on it and ask questions and understand what it's doing, it still is a huge enabler for a back-end engineer to write CSS or a front-end engineer to write a Go microservice or something. Like, it gives people who have maybe some of the more architecture understanding of how the product works, how the requirements work, they get to serve this new role of being able to direct traffic and direct where things go. And in that world, a product engineer is a much more, I think, will be a much more common way of building software than specifically a front end or back end engineer. And I think part of the tricky thing with that is that a lot of people have their identities attached to, I am a front end engineer or I am a back end engineer. And I think AI in general is making people kind of grapple with that. Like, what do I want to do for the next 10 years? I thought I was going to be this, very specialized person in front end, but if an AI model is getting better and better at generating CSS code, does that mean that somehow that craft changes? And we could go on this much more in depth. I think the answer is it's a little of both. It's both, yes, actually the experts matter more than ever. They're the people who have the craft to really build amazing experiences. And for the majority of people, they probably want to be thinking more about the end-to-end product experience. Server components are kind of, and server actions are like a manifestation of this, in my opinion, because if you're writing a server action, it is essentially an RPC endpoint that you can call from your front end. You don't have to go spin up a separate API. Your server action could talk to your database, and you could have this, I like to call it a majestic monolith. You can have your majestic monolith that deploys your front end and back end code together, where you have kind of your data layer as part of your bigger application. You can build apps like that. And then the question becomes, who are the people actually building the apps? Is it one person empowered to do that kind of full stack experience and they can just move super fast? Awesome. If it's a team of like 50, they kind of have to be bought into that way of working. Otherwise, why would they not just do the old pattern that they're used to of they have an API repo, the API repo's got its own CI/CD, it's got its own checks and balances. So it challenges that model a bit.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, what a company is going to want is to iterate on products faster.
Right.
And so from a company perspective, they're going to be like, oh, one engineer can do both and work across the stack enabled via, the client and server presence of React. Well, let's just have them do that, because at the end of the day, if the API's sole purpose is to serve the front end, you don't really need that API boundary then, right? You can lean on those RPC calls.
Right. And I think most of the time, the UI that gets generated for a page is not this clean mapping of REST API endpoint to UI on the screen. It's
Never
like
is.
some strange amalgamation of 4 REST APIs. Plus there was actually one extra prop that we had, like this one optional argument on a REST API to return back a different. So you end up building these bespoke endpoints for every page anyway. And if you take that idea to the kind of logical maximum, you end up with an API for every single kind of page, whether you're running that at the build time and pre-rendering the page, like getting the data for the page and then making HTML, or you're doing that dynamically at runtime when it is kind of a specialized API only for rendering the contents of that specific route.
Or you invent GraphQL and solve the problem in that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Quick segue. I went to your website to grab that post and it looks very different than I remember it. It's very minimal now. Had a little design shift lately?
Yeah, I changed the design probably like once a year, depending on how I'm feeling. And it's went from very complex to very simple to very complex to now I guess I'm in my simple era again. It was a good forcing function for me to spend a bit more time thinking about the words on the screen. So I refactored some of my notes and just tried to make them a bit more crisp on DX and DevRel and writing and product engineers and all that stuff. So yeah,
when it's a simple website, the person writing cares about what they're writing about and not all the engineering that goes around it.
Yeah.
Like the content king. A lot of the stuff that you've been posting lately has been around personal software, which I've just found fascinating and super interesting. And it kind of connects to what we're talking about, where these React Server components allow just one person to move quickly. So with V0 and all the other pieces that you guys are working on at Vercel, how has that changed your approach to software and the things that you build on the side?
Yeah, I think throughout my whole career, there's always been what I would call like one-off or disposable software. There have been things where you needed to create a small tool to allow you to get the job done faster, or to automate some part of the process, or maybe just to solve a little pain point. One that I use all the time actually is you paste in rich text and you get back Markdown. And the other day I went to the website and I used Brave browser and it blocked it because it has an ad blocker, I guess. And all I was doing was just copy pasting in rich text like from a Slack message and getting back a Markdown output. So I was like, okay, I can probably just make a quick V0 of this and just put it on my own domain, or just keep a Vercel domain. And now I have my own little tool that I can use. It's nothing fancy. It's just copy pasting things from one format to another. But turns out AI is actually pretty good for those little kind of one-off cases. And what I've realized now is, as code generation continues to get better, it becomes more and more accessible for not only developers, but really anybody to take their ideas and build this one-off software, or what I've been calling personal software. For me, personal software is I'm building it for myself and I don't really care about anybody else. So I built my own bookmarks site, because there's a million websites where you can store your bookmarks. You can put them in an Apple Note. You can get a Chrome extension. But I just wanted something that I really enjoyed using. It had the right UX that I wanted. It saved everything to my own database. I owned the data, right? So I just built something really quick in like a day and made it. And now I have it on my own subdomain on my own website. Like, I own it end to end. It's not for anybody else. There's no login. There's no SaaS. There's no pricing page. Like, it's just for me. And I think that this will become more and more common as more people get exposed to code tools. What I've been calling V0 a code last tool, which we can talk more about if you want. As more and more people get acclimated to that, and they are like, actually, this isn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, then when they have an idea for something, they can just build it. And they don't have to go ask somebody to do it. And maybe they're not trying to turn it into the next big thing. They're just trying to make their ideas real. And that, I think that's very exciting.
I think like there's a lot of things right now coming out that are empowering builders and makers to just do jobs more effectively. I think about things like Raspberry Pis opening up electronics, things like 3D printers opening up fabrication, and then things like AI and V0 opening up, code generation, where like if you can combine all of those things, you can make real physical products that have electronics and logic in them. And it's just enabling that for the masses, or for those that are curious at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't remember what language you can write Raspberry Pi in. I think it's Python. I can't really remember. I used to have one and hack around with it. But yeah, the intersection between physical electronics and software has always been interesting to me. I would like to hack on that type of stuff more. But the cool thing is, like, now that AIs understand all of Python, right? If you're building a little script that's controlling some LEDs or some like motors on a breadboard, like, it's so much easier now than it ever was before.
So what is your, oh, sorry, Brad.
We're probably going to ask the same question.
Okay,
Go for it.
Perfect. So what does your workflow look like? I mean, you have a problem. Do you go straight to V0 or do you start somewhere else?
Yeah, I think for most of these kind of smaller one-off ideas I have around a piece of personal software or something that's kind of disposable, I will just use V0 as a consultant, essentially. Like, I will say, hey, I'm trying to build this idea. I'm not sure exactly what it will look like, but can you give me some suggestions? And it will kind of spit out prototypes I can play with and click around and see how they feel. Another thing that I do kind of frequently is I'll find inspiration on the web of a design I like, or a product that I really like, and I will take parts of the UI, screenshot them, and say, hey, I really like this table. Let's use this table design or something kind of like this design to show my bookmarks, because I want it to kind of feel that same UX pattern. So the screenshot to code functionality is really nice.
I need to experiment with that, because it's like half the time it doesn't give me the design that I want, and I know enough to be like, I'm just going to do this myself so it looks exactly the way I want it to. But
yeah,
I need to play with that.
Other than V0, which I use for a lot of the code generation, I also use I think about V0 right now. I think is doing a good job of I would say like not as much targeted at the professional software engineer. Like you're probably not going to build 99% of the code you write for your job in V0. That's just not realistic, right? And I think one of the key things to working well with AI tools is knowing where it's great and also where the shortcomings are. Like it's just not realistic that you would do that. So for me, it's some combination of I use V0 and code generation tools that help me kind of build the UI for prototypes, for side projects, for initial ideas that I'm doing, or to just try to help fill in the gaps of the broader app that I'm trying to build. Or if I'm trying to build something on the side just to stand it up very quickly, like 0 to 1, then I'm still using an IDE, right? Like I'm still a professional software engineer. I still write code and I'm still working that into my workflow. So having support in V0 for Git makes a lot of sense, because then you're still having Git as the source of truth. And you can still use your IDE, and the IDE space is very interesting right now as well. There's lots happening. So it's cool to see progress being made there too.
What's your IDE preference?
I have a video on my YouTube, if you're interested, where it talks about, I can't remember, it's 6 months or 9 months, but I spent like 6 months trying different code editors, just trying to not only see how they work, but learn more about AI code generation and what I liked and what I didn't like. And I went from using NeoVim and a terminal to things like Zed and Cursor. And I've been using Windsurf as well to like really get a broad understanding of the landscape. And they all have their benefits, but I've been using Cursor more, I would say. Also, VS Code is getting really good again. Like they've added a bunch of new functionality. Their chatbot or agent functionality is getting pretty good. So yeah, it's fun to watch all of them innovate and try out new ideas. I think the one thing that I haven't seen that I think will be very exciting is the ability to more easily run like multiple things in parallel. Because right now, when you're having one chat, you're doing kind of one operation. One thing that more of the AI agents, granted that word gets used a lot for a lot of things, but I'll give you an example of something like Devin. Devin is the AI software engineer that does a better job of parallelizing a bunch of different things. It's like you're starting n number of threads. Like I might say, go do this PR, go fix this issue, go write this documentation page. And right now, the current chat interfaces for a lot of the IDEs, it feels very like focused on one task and one task only. I've heard people doing some wild stuff where they have like 6 cursor windows open and they're like firing off things in a bunch of different windows, which like, sure, if that works, great. I think there will be a design step here that will make things hopefully much easier to use.
Do you think we've unlocked the right UI for our current form of AI tools yet? Or do you still feel like we're feeling it out? Because everything kind of looks like a rectangular chat box. You know what I mean? Everything looks almost exactly the same.
Yeah, no, I don't think we figured it out. I think there's still a lot more innovation to go. At the same time, it is oddly satisfying how well the chat interface works. Like it kind of
presents simplicity, you know, and then does a lot of complex things behind the scenes.
It's kind of beautifully simplistic, and at the same time, it does have a high initial barrier of entry for somebody who has no understanding. So it's like, I'm trying to remember I think it's in San Francisco. There's a computer history museum, and they put up an exhibit of ChatGPT, and you can go and ask it questions. And it's interesting because you could watch people who are older go up to it, and they don't really know what you type in this just open text box that can answer literally any question in the world. So it takes a little bit of trial and error, I guess, to be like, okay, here's what it's good at, here's what it's not good at. Like, I installed ChatGPT on my dad's phone. He just got an iPhone like 2 years ago, just to put it into perspective here. So he's 72. He's not a tech person at all. And he's now starting to figure it out. So it took a little bit, and I would go look at his thing, and he's like asking questions about the history of bands that he listens to. But I think he's got it figured out now. It took a little bit of time.
That's so funny. I remember before ChatGPT came out, getting these emails for webinars. It's like the future of chatbots. And I was like, oh yeah, great. But I mean, that's kind of the world that we live in right now. I think probably the biggest disservice that it does. And I was on a new podcast called Dysfunctional FM, and one of the engineers there was talking about this mindset. I never thought about this. But because we work within that chat interface, we think of ChatGPT almost like a person. So we're only having typically one conversation with that person, or as you mentioned, we're pulling up multiple cursor windows to have 6 different conversations with 6 different people. But the thing is, you're talking to a computer, so it's not one personality. You can say, be 3 people, be a senior dev, be a junior dev, be a mid-level. Tell me all the things that these people are concerned about, and maybe how I can write, or problems that they might encounter as these 3 different personas. And you get a little bit more like of a panel type situation where you're getting more feedback about what you're building, which is really interesting. So I'd be curious if there's a way to kind of evolve or iterate on that interface so that we're not locked into that mental model.
Yeah, there's got to be something here. It's one of those things where I feel like once we see it, it'll look obvious in retrospect, but I haven't seen a good example of it yet.
Yes.
The like multiple personalities thing makes a ton of sense. And I think that will have to be part of the design. It also reminds me, quick plug, if you haven't watched the movie Her, like it's literally what the plot of the movie. It's like you think you're talking to one of the AIs, but there's like multiple AI versions. I think there's that one quote where he's like, how many other people are you talking to right now? And she's like 827 million or something. So crazy.
I need to watch that. That's the one where Scarlett Johansson's the voice, right?
Yeah. It's good. It's good to like compare it against the AI landscape today. One thing that I like, a lot of smart people, much smarter than myself, who are deep in the AI trenches, they always say that sci-fi writers are super underrated because they are kind of imagining and creating the future, whether they realize it or not, because their ideas spark this next generation of people to go and try to actually build those things. Like, how many people watch Back to the Future and were like, we need hoverboards, like somebody's got to build that hoverboard. And then a whole generation went on to try to like make something like that possible. It's really interesting.
Oh, that's so funny. This is totally off topic, but there's a kid in my daughter's class that's like obsessed with Back to the Future, and it's like the cutest thing ever because he's built a time machine and is like
nice
all kinds of stuff. So I'm getting back on track. What are some of the personal software projects that you're working on right now?
There's been one that I was kind of hacking on and off on the side, but a better way of organizing all of the different pieces of guitar tabs that I have. It's like I had a bunch of bookmarks and I was trying to turn it into like a little app that I can play with. That was a fun one. I have my bookmarks app. That's been fun. I was also exploring what it would look like to build my own little music player, it's one of those things where it's the bell curve meme of, wow, this seems really easy. And then it's like, oh no, it's like way more difficult than I thought. And then it's like, I'm just gonna go use Spotify. It has been fun just to get to learn more about it and try to figure out how I would do some of the pieces. But yeah, it also, if nothing else, gives you an appreciation for good software, which I have my qualms with Spotify. So I don't know if I would bucket it under great software, but it does exist and solve a need. So I will give it good.
But I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Is I pay an embarrassing amount of money to services that I don't particularly like.
Right.
QuickBooks is the first one that comes to mind. I hate that interface, but I have to pay for it because that manages all of my business expenses. So I think the part that excites me the most about personal software is building something where it's like, I don't care. As you mentioned, I don't care if the UI works for anybody else. This works for me and my mental model and how I manage my books. So,
right. I think there will be a ton of similar use cases to your QuickBooks one where you're using a tool for a specific workflow that you've created, and you kind of stop and realize, hey, actually 80% of this product I don't need. I don't need the collaboration features. I don't need all these menu options. Like, I'm really only doing these one or two very specific tasks. As AI gets better, you might decide, okay, I'm just going to actually build my own like very simple version of this. Or in a farther away future, although I can see it being real, you have these kind of autonomous AI agents that you can basically codify your workflow. It's like, my workflow is download the CSV or download the invoice, parse the invoice, go put it into the software, like make sure the numbers line up, all the checks and balances pass, go submit. Like you codify exactly what you were doing, and then you have a computer who can go and actually remotely use computers to do your work for you. It's kind of meta, but I think that was definitely possible in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just the stuff that they're developing now with the MCP servers is incredibly interesting. Actually thinking about that, are there parts at Vercel that you guys are looking at with MCP servers and trying to set up integrations?
Yeah, MCP is interesting. I think I struggle the most with it because I'm generally a very optimistic person, and I like to be optimistic about technology. And I do see a lot of the interesting things that you can do with MCP. The tricky thing is that I also get cynical about the hype cycles. So MCP has been one that's been hard for me to get extremely excited about because of how almost over the top it feels. Like people are really, really excited about MCP for some reason. And I do think there is potential, and I do think there's some exciting things. But yeah, I think the reality is probably more like somewhere down here. With all of that being said, one of the things that we have been building around MCP that I do think will be beneficial is essentially you can just ask, why did my build fail? Like, how do I fix my failed build? Happens way more often than you would realize. Like, people just push up code and the build fails, and it was actually a TypeScript error. You forgot to include this one thing. Here's how you fix it. Great, done. Move on. Another one is understanding how the framework code that you wrote influenced the infrastructure that was used. I got a spike in usage. I don't really understand what happened. It looks at your infrastructure usage. Then it looks at the code in your repo. Well, by the way, you had this, API call that could take 30 seconds, and you might want to change it so that there's a timeout after 5 seconds or something like that. I think those kind of more practical use cases will make a lot of sense. I don't think people will like run their lives out of MCP servers, although I have seen some people say that they're trying to do that. But I am excited about the potential of a AI model or an AI chat interface being able to integrate and call other external tools. It's not really one-to-one with an API because there might be multiple APIs behind the scenes, but having that interface to actually go and do that, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Brad, do you have any?
I got a question. It's kind of a change of topic. One of the things I'm curious about is I feel like the scope of what Vercel has to offer now has widened over time, right? You know, there's the hosting platform, there's Next.js, but Vercel's acquired a bunch of other like really cool technologies and products and companies, like let's say TurboPack and things like that. And so the breadth of things that Vercel supports and owns and manages and documents is getting bigger. How does the DevRel team approach like presenting all of this information cohesively, or do you think about it as like independent buckets of like we teach this topic or product and this other topic or product, or do you want to bring them all together and say look at all the value that Vercel as a whole can provide when you can combine all these services?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I generally think about our DevRel efforts as being focused on products that have an open source community. So Next.js, the AI SDK, Turbo Repo, these are open source projects that work independently of Vercel, that Vercel sponsors, maintains, invests in, and it also works on Vercel. And the reason why DevRel is important for those is it's not only teaching people how to use the product and be successful with it if they choose Vercel, but also if they don't choose Vercel. So if you want to take Next.js and you want to put it on your own $5 VPS, that's great. You can follow my tutorial. That's awesome. Of course, I would love for you to use it on Vercel, but Vercel isn't always going to be the right fit for everyone. And part of what DevRel does is it helps bridge that gap of being the community champions and advocates for it doesn't always have to be on Vercel's infrastructure. Vercel infrastructure is like a separate product to the Next.js or Turbo Repo or AI SDK frameworks that we work on. So the frameworks have a DevRel pairing with them. Then broadly, when you think about Vercel as a company, as a allocator of different products, we have our infrastructure business. We have observability tools that help you understand your usage and understand your infrastructure. We are increasingly building more options for building AI applications, whether it's compute or running your own agent or doing an MCP server or any of those type of applications. For those, it's less about DevRel. It's more about just marketing. So that's kind of where I make a little bit of that distinction of like, we do have developer products that will market kind of independently from the frameworks. The places where I feel like there's more of a need for my team being involved in DevRel is specifically when there's an open source component and kind of helping bridge that gap.
Yeah, that makes sense because open source projects need to kind of be managed independently regardless from product offerings.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, it all works great together. That's certainly the goal, is we want to make sure that when you take your Next.js code and you deploy it to Vercel, it works really smooth. I want to apply that same thing for any framework, though. When you take your Nuxt code, I also want that to work extremely well on Vercel. When you take your SvelteKit code, I want that to work really great on Vercel. So it's helpful to have them separate in some ways because you're building the abstraction that works for all of the different providers.
Yeah, and you mentioned integrations. Y'all have recently done some third-party integrations with, I believe it's like things like Supabase, Neon, where you can even consolidate billing directly into Vercel.
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Yeah, so over a year ago, we launched our first endeavor into what would it look like if you could purchase a database through Vercel. Very common ask we got was, hey, I have my front end on Vercel. I want to also build my back end on Vercel. To do that, I need to have a database. Can I just all get it in one bill? So we started off by launching kind of our own database solutions that were integrations under the hood with other third-party services. What we kind of found was people didn't really want that layer of abstraction. They wanted to know where their database was. And critically, like they wanted just to pay the same price as going and using the database directly. That the reason why they were going through Vercel was the simplicity of it being all on one bill. Right. So we only had one Postgres offering. We only had one Redis offering. And we thought, maybe we should just open this up to everyone and make it so that it's the same price you get when you go direct, and we can have a bunch of different options. So fast forward to the future, today, we now have a marketplace that has first-party integrations with, I think, like 9 different Postgres companies and multiple different Redis providers, queue providers. If you want to do Kafka, we have, Upstash can do that. Like there's video infrastructure like Mux. I think Sentry, if you want to do air infrastructure, like we have just a bunch of different tools on the marketplace that you can integrate through Vercel and get that first party billing experience. Everything just flows through one bill. And in certain places, we can take the provider and make it feel more like a native part of the dashboard. So for example, with the Postgres databases or Redis stores or other options, like you go to your Vercel project, you click on storage, it feels like you actually have a database in Vercel, but you have the full power of, you click a button in the top right and it says open in Supabase or open in Upstash or whatever provider. And I think that's helped us kind of bridge the gap there, where I think it solves the need of people wanting to have a consolidated solution, just like the Herokus of the past, but it's the same price you get as going direct, and you have the full power of just using the full underlying provider.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Because you do want to view things on like a project level. Like if I've got this application I'm building, here's everything that I have under there, and it rolls up into one bill. And so I know my spend without having to like go everywhere and
Right.
piece it all together.
Yeah, 100%.
Another new thing that I feel like I haven't wrapped my head around that Vercel is offering is fluid compute. Can you
Right.
like take a minute to explain what that
Yeah.
is and how that works?
Yeah, definitely. So for the historians listening, Vercel started out doing servers back in 2016. We essentially allowed you to take a container, some Docker file, and run a server in the cloud very easily. Over time, we realized that has some pretty painful trade-offs. There's certainly lots of good that comes with it, and I think a lot of companies in 2025 are innovating on making that easier than ever. But at the time, we decided, okay, let's explore what the serverless model looks like. So I think it was like 2018, going to 2019, we started changing from servers to serverless, notably built on AWS Lambda functions. And there are a lot of things to love, right? When you're not using it, it goes to 0. You don't pay for it. If you get a big spike of traffic, it can just scale up. You don't have to go configure the number of instances. Awesome. Then over time, what we started to realize is serverless also has downsides. We knew of some of them going into it. Some of them we learned along the way. Notably, cold starts are really hard to figure out. And we had tried some other solutions in the past, like going on this whole journey with edge runtimes. And it's tricky because the promise was that you wouldn't have a cold start if you used the limited runtime. In practice, it didn't really work out that way. So cold starts was a tricky one. The other one was trying to get the best possible performance out of the underlying function or instance. And you want to use the full power of whatever runtime you're using. So for most people on Vercel, this was Node.js. And kind of put us at a crossroads a bit of what we wanted to do with servers and serverless. Ideally, you could take like the good parts of servers and the good parts of serverless and kind of merge them together. But we knew it was not going to be AWS Lambda. Like you couldn't just go purchase this at AWS. It didn't exist. It wasn't Fargate at AWS. It also wasn't other cloud infrastructure that we had explored. So we're like, well, shoot, we're going to have to build something here that solves what we're looking for. So over time, we slowly built the individual pieces of what ultimately led to be fluid compute. And the way you can think about it is basically this. The serverless model typically has one request goes to one function. And while that function is serving the request, it doesn't do anything else. It's just sitting there. A server usually has many requests going into one server box, and that allows it to be much more concurrent, much more efficient. We took that model of servers and applied it to serverless functions. We also made it so that there's one minimum active instance, so you don't have cold starts because there's at least one that's running up. If you're still spinning up like a preview environment from 0 to 1, there's a startup time for that. But your production instances, right? You're keeping one of those active. And while doing that, you get to retain the benefits of if you do have a big spike in traffic, I don't have to go in and explicitly configure the number of instances that I want. So we've tried to bridge the worlds of server and serverless. It's now the default Fluid Compute is for all new projects. So it's been working really well. In some instances, customers save more, on average, it's more like 50 or 60%. But I saw one the other day that was 90%. They're saving versus the usage that they would have on just for cell functions without Fluid. So where we're headed towards in the future is Fluid will be, it already is the default, but we'll hopefully have a path to get everyone on Fluid in the future. It's faster, cost savings, and it works better for the majority of apps that people are trying to deploy to Vercel today, which are some kind of Node.js or Python apps that are probably talking to AI models or maybe talking to databases or some things that take a decent chunk of time. They want it to be more efficient, and you save money when they're not actually doing work on the function. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I saw those visualizations that kind of showed like how these Fluid Compute handle incoming request versus serverless functions or long-running servers. And it was really helpful to try and visualize like exactly how the performance gains are realized based on how the requests are handled. And that's, it rolls up into DevRel too. It's like, how do we explain the benefits of this almost like hardware and compute offering so that people know this is a good choice?
Yeah, it's been a fun one to explain because it required I've had to get a lot more knowledgeable about how all of the infrastructure works over the years. I definitely did not have this level of how compute works when I first joined Vercel. But now that I have a bit better of an understanding of how all the pieces fit together, I think I can hopefully do a better job of explaining why it's beneficial and how it works. And also some of the journey along the way on the things we tried that didn't work out.
Yeah, awesome.
So we're going to do something a little different. You get to be our first guest that gets rapid fire questions. So what is your favorite underrated Next.js feature?
I think that one that people might take for granted, but that I really like is the font optimization, because almost every site has a font, and doing fonts correctly on the web is still really, really hard. And there's a lot of little things that the font component or abstraction kind of takes away for you, making sure you preload fonts, making sure that they're hosted on the same domain, making sure that you can serve a font and have minimal layout shift if you have a fallback font before the custom font loads in, and so on and so forth. Whether it's a local font or it's one from Google Fonts, like it's definitely underrated.
Okay, second rapid fire question. What is the most challenging concept to teach to developers?
I think the easy answer is probably server components right now, because it's so new. I think it's very challenging to teach to people, and we're still making progress on that. But maybe a less React or less specific thing in that area, I think, is just like security best practices in general. I think it is something that often gets taught as an afterthought in just like development in general, and trying to find the right way to weave that into education without it feeling too overbearing and making it feel tasteful and fun, I think is a good challenge for educators. Because I think a lot of the security training, it's like, it feels not great. It feels kind of boring, but you can make it fun. And I think making it fun and making it part of the default learning experience is a good opportunity.
Yep. CLI or GUI?
I'm mostly a GUI guy. Yeah. After doing the whole NeoVim journey, which was wonderful, it just makes me appreciate. I like the pixels. I'm a design guy. I like the pixels. Pixels are good.
What's one tool you couldn't live without, physical or digital?
Definitely the one I use the most is my MacBook, and I've been on the Apple Mac ecosystem train for a very long time now. 10 plus
you
years.
And Brad.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine not being on the Mac ecosystem now. So I'm very much bought into that way of living.
this is not on our list, but I'm going to ask it. What's your favorite app? We can do desktop and phone.
I would say I'll give 2 for desktop. The one that I use quite a bit, it's called text.com, I think. Text.com. It is a unified inbox for a bunch of different social apps. So
Nice.
if you've tried to use the Twitter X DMs, if you DM people frequently, it's probably very hard to manage. So I do like the app for that, as well as like coalescing Discord DMs and WhatsApp and like a bunch of other stuff. So I like text. Granola is a AI note taker. It's pretty good. You just turn it on during meetings and it AI summarizes the notes in a way that's pretty helpful. So pretty easy to use. That's web. For mobile, let's see. My mobile usage is like pretty basic, honestly. Like I feel like I spend the vast majority of my mobile time on X or on Slack. Other than that, like I don't try not to use it too much, but I will give one shout out for Superhuman, which is the email client that I use. It does work pretty well. I like the mobile app and the desktop app, and I've got like a routine going now with it. So it's nice.
That is good. Have you used Brick at all? This is not a rapid fire question, or maybe it is. Have you used Brick at all? Have you heard about that? I've been eyeing it, but I don't feel like I'm too terribly addicted to my phone. It's Aaron Francis is a big advocate of it, but it's like a physical brick that you like stick on your refrigerator, and there's an app on your phone that you kind of like brick your phone, but you have to go to the physical brick to unlock it. And so the idea is it turns your phone into like minimal usage, no distractions.
Nice.
And then you can get that, but you have to like physically get up and unlock it.
You know, in a world where social media is not my job, I am going to love that. It is kind of a weird, like that with being on social media, not really as much for fun, but more so for like work stuff. It has definitely changed my relationship with social media all up.
Sure.
Like I don't really use Facebook or Instagram like I once did in the past. But once I'm not doing that at some point in the future, then yeah, I'm going to do that for sure.
Yeah. This is going to sound very old lady, and that's okay. My computer is harder for me than my phone in terms of distractions because I have a laptop. I don't just leave it in my office. I'll carry it around the house. And if
don't you know the meme that if you're a millennial or older, you can't do any purchases on the small screen. You have to do it on the big screen. When I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that is me. I'm old.
I get mad at using like my phone for like real tasks, and I have to sit down at a computer.
So funny. And all the kids listening are like, geesh.
Yeah, or big purchases. I've also heard that you can't make a big purchase on your phone. You have to real work. Hilarious.
Well, Lee, it's been awesome having you on. It's been a really good conversation. We thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. This was fun as always.
Yeah. If you are listening in your podcatcher of choice, please leave a rating and review. It helps other developers find the show as well as bring other great guests on. For now, that's all we got. Sweet. And I'll go ahead and close it. Thanks everybody for hanging out. I think we had quite a few listeners on X. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream.
The live streaming